Welcome to the Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to, sorry, I'm looking down here at my face. Don't pay no attention. Welcome to episode 15, I think, of the Epik Mellon podcast. And here I am in Paris at the NetworkX trade show. So this is now the third in-person interview we've been able to do. And this is João, who's a very good friend of mine. And I was actually in the room, in the bar, when we decided to make this podcast.
That's right. I confirm that.
Yeah. We ended up having a ton of conversations about how we all got here and all the weird things that have happened to us over the years. And we were like, you know what? We should talk about this.
I mean, we do. And if you think of it, that's actually how everything happened. We
Right.
just started having conversations and things started to happen. We couldn't run away from it.
It's true. So if you haven't watched the show so far, you know, or if you have, you're probably very familiar with the fact that Epik Mellon is entirely funded by my company, QA Cafe. And as such, the views expressed by, despite the fact that it is funded up, the views expressed by me or my guests do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its ownership. And the same definitely goes for DTA. So pretend these are all our opinions. And also, you know, I'm not going to do my full advertising spiel that I do this time, but because we're funded by QA Cafe, you know, I do like to mention that we do have three great products that we make. CD Router, which is the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi access points, and other CPE. And that's actually the subject of this entire show. And CloudShark, which is a web-based and collaborative packet analysis tool for cybersecurity teams, and Passport, which is an interoperability and connectivity test platform for IoT smart home devices. That's way shorter than what I usually. Yeah. So like I said, we were sitting in a bar and with Paul Keeter too, who's been on the show previously, and we were like, hey, let's start a podcast where we just talk about
Who's the next victim, I guess.
So this was a huge opportunity, right? Because we're like, I'm here for an event called the Purple Summit, which Israel is very much involved in. And then also this NetworkX trade show. So I was like, oh, sweet. I have an opportunity to sit down in person with Israel. Let's do it. So the format of the show became Humans of Networking. So we kind of tell the stories of how we got into this life, which is usually not what we intended. How did that happen for you?
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing. You know, it's we know that life is not a straight line. We start with some ideas, then you come across other people just like you, Jason. You know, things start to happen, and we end up here with even knowing about it. But you know, that's about
Right.
we build things on the way.
Right. Yep. No,
That's what makes it interesting.
Did you start? Have you always been into computer sciencey things, or did you start somewhere totally different?
Yes, I mean that's very interesting. So my relationship with computers started very early. So I just was one of those people that like building things. So for example, just to give you a little reference, I started to code when I was 13 years old, just because I found it fun. It was back still in the times where you had the Mirk, internet relay chat, and I like to see things working on their own. So I started looking at files. I started to change things. What happens if I change that? What happens then? And then suddenly after a while, I just realized, hey, this is my passion. This is what I like to do. And things just kept on happening. So you can guess what I do in my spare time. I just play around with the gadgets and so on.
Well, no, and I was telling a similar story, right? Like I didn't think I would ever get into things like that. Because, my initial computers were all, it was Apple IIs and stuff like that. And I liked writing code. I liked writing BASIC and playing around with it. But it wasn't until I had like my first actual like Windows PC, with DOS. And the fact that you had to like really get into the guts of it in order to play certain games, that was like the motivating factor. And you're like, no, I'm going to get this to work. Like I have to make a boot disk and do this just to play this Wing Commander. Like
it's very funny because I also have some stories about that. So for example, one of the things that I can tell you about myself that a lot of people don't know, and I think it's funny to reference this is I have always considered myself a good student, but I wasn't the best in my class. I was just a good student. But when I went to the university, I actually said, "Hey, I want to be the best." So I'm really going to put the effort this time, and I really want to be at the top. And then I faced some challenges, Jason, because in order to be at the top and so on, it's not just about being smart or whatever. You have to put the effort, right? You have to be very consistent. That's the difference. And in order to do that, you need to really invest into it. And I had some challenges because, apart from studying, I also many people also like to do other cool things.
Yeah. No,
so
it's true.
How do I solve this problem, right? How can I get myself more time to put effort into studying? So, and back then I also liked computer games apart from sports and so on. And I said, okay, I need to be into places at the same time. Wouldn't it be great if I could study and I could play at the same time? How can I do that? And
so João started running himself in a container.
Back then we're talking about containers back then, but I ended up, programming in Java and creating a bot to play on my behalf. So it would be, I did, and it worked out, it did the grinding, it did the boring stuff so that when I came back, I could actually enjoy those times. So yes, it was only it was World of Warcraft.
You made a World of Warcraft.
Cool. Yeah. Don't say that. They'll ban my account. But I don't play it anymore, so it's not a risk.
Yeah. John Blackbird plays it too. He's actually really still into it. Started doing like the classic one, because they re-released like the old one.
And I called it I Play, by the way.
Nice.
Because
back before something was a thing.
I have to admit, I got some inspiration from
something came up on Facebook for me, Facebook Memories. And it's funny because we were going to do this today. It was, I wonder how many people alive today don't know why they're called podcasts. Because it was the iPod, right?
I actually didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's why, right? Because Apple had this thing of doing let's do recorded radio shows on the iPod, and they called them podcasts. iPods don't exist anymore.
Okay, interesting. Well, I learned something.
But it's why? What a weird word. Why would you call it podcasts? That's fine. No. So the stuff, in terms of just the general networking stuff of our lives. The reasons why both João and I are here is because we're working very deeply on, and I think I've talked about this a couple of times on the show about the home router becoming smart. And it's a computer. It's already a computer. I was explaining this to my teenager. I was like, she was like, what are you going to talk about when you're there? I'm like, well, we're going to talk about putting apps on gateways. She's like, okay. And I'm like, because it's just a computer like anything else. And so it can just do stuff just like a phone. And she's like, Chuck, I think I understand this. And so that's why we're here, because we've been kind of working on that stuff. And if you walk around this show floor, and it was like this last year too, because we've been working on this stuff for a while. That is what everybody who makes one of those products, that's what we're talking, right? And putting an open source background.
It is, and I mean, if you think of it, it might sound a little bit strange at first because I think it's exactly the experience that you have. And you really put something on a device, and especially because what I think, and I've been thinking about this, I think one of the reasons why it's awkward or strange for CPs is because it doesn't have a screen.
Right.
So how can you show that?
Right.
Because I think that's the benefit of a phone. There's a screen to it. People can see what's happening behind the scenes. And this is also about something interesting. Maybe this is something I can share as well. So I always have been into computers. I have always, been linked to associated with technology. So somehow I felt that I knew how things work. But I have never imagined all the things that have been happening inside a CP before I started working with an operator.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And it's also funny, that story as well, because I still remember being a little bit younger.
Yeah.
And also doing something at a computer, even playing a little game. And suddenly I have my CPU rebooting. I'm like, who are these guys creating this stuff? Why can't they create something stable?
Yeah.
And the irony is that, one of my first jobs, I ended up in a service provider,
Right.
in engineering team, working exactly on CPs. So it's like, I was like, I mean, that's such a big
that's why.
coincidence. Now I have to fix the problems that I can't just complain. I have to fix those problems as well.
What's one of the things I was talking about with Sophie Spool, also DT, on the last show, was how it's very weird. Like there's other networking technologies, right? More like the big stuff, right? Like enterprise networking and like all the stuff that actually makes the big pipes of the internet go, right? That is a totally other world compared to like home networking, residential networking, and subscriber networking, right? Because we're also the consumers of that product. Right. And so it's a weird context for us.
But it's, I think it's a fun fact because we get to work at something that we can use.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us that little extra motivation boost that, maybe it's more people, I think they would have appreciated if they had.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. No, it's like, I don't want to have to reboot my router.
If you screw, it's going to come back to cheese, right?
It's true. It's true. Actually, it's funny you say that because I always think about that in the context of USP and TR69 before this, right? Which I've talked about a lot on the show. Those are remote management protocols, network protocols that let the service provider control your router, right? And I always think about, not that there are privacy issues with using those protocols, like people are very conscious of it, but I always think about the fact that I'm like, I did invent a thing or help invent a thing that allows service providers to sort of look at your router and monitor what's going on. It's like, am I comfortable with that?
But it's interesting that you mentioned that because, for example, sometimes I feel a little bit like that way. So when I come to these events, I really feel the appreciation because people come to me, they ask me about questions, they congratulate me on everything that I'm doing. And that helps me remind me that, what we are doing is actually impacting people's lives. Yeah. But, on the daily business, you are so involved into these things. You actually forget how much we are doing.
Yeah.
So
I'm
a victim of that as well.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
And just like going to see people who have implemented that stuff and like see it working, like demos that were at Purple Summit.
Yeah.
Seeing like USB messages going back and forth and making real things happen on the stuff that they built. I'm like, that's cool.
Yes. And it's, it's very easy, to talk about ideas. It's, very easy to create products, but at the end of the day, creating something that works, that people can use,
right,
and that people adopt. That's even, I think, even more. It's like more important.
It's like there's a little mountain and then a big mountain.
Yeah, it is challenging. So I think we also have to take a moment to say, hey, we've achieved something. Of course, it wasn't just on the two of us; it was everybody together in this. But I take a little pride on being able to speak with different people, including yourself, including all these things, and being able to be on the same page,
right,
with so many people. Because the more people involved, the more different ideas, different perspectives, and I think that's what makes it very, very difficult.
Right.
How can you build something, that is going to benefit the whole industry?
Right.
Because if you think of it, it's not just service providers, it's application developers, it's the suppliers, OEMs,
it's everyone, right?
SOCs, it's the end customer as well.
Yeah.
Of course.
The end customer is the king.
Yes, exactly. So how can you build something which can benefit the whole chain? Mm-hmm. And that's very difficult to do.
No, it is, right? It is. And it's I was talking a little bit about this on on the panel with the other standards guys yesterday or Monday. I don't even know what day it is. Today is Wednesday. We've been here for 3 days. About every single piece of that chain that you just mentioned is all people. It's all people, right? And so it's like, it's kind of humbling that that we've kind of like created an industry, in a way, or at least we've created work for a bunch of people, and that now all those people are coming together. They're meeting each other. You and I wouldn't have met if we hadn't, if you hadn't been like, hey, we want to use USB to run apps on the gateway. We're like, okay, let's do it.
It's funny because it was actually like that. It wasn't just an idea, right?
Right.
It was an idea, then it was a conversation. And I think we were a little bit bold in the sense that let's do it. And we actually did it.
Yep.
And it involved a lot of people, but I'm happy that we took that bet. I'm happy that we tried. And
no. And like you said, it's like, I wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be doing this podcast. This podcast wouldn't exist because we would never have that conversation in the bar.
That's true.
And it's just, so like to trade shows like this, it's like, it always reminds me how important the human aspect is. Right. And it's like, yes, we can get a lot done remotely, but it's so nice to like come and see people and realize the human beings behind it all, It's not all matters. It all affects their lives too.
It is. And, I work a lot from home. I think it has its benefits. It gave me a little bit of extra time, which I can use to do other things because, for example, I'm living in Germany. So I use actually that time to actually study German and learn. So that is something that I was struggling to do before,
Right.
And so I managed to get that into my schedule on a regular basis. So that has been helping me out, but it's a double-edged sword, right? Because, it's also important to commute. It's also important to spend time with people because I think that's when the ideas and the creative aspect really comes down. So I think it's multiple factors there. And maybe it isn't just being face to face, but I think the format of the interactions that we have online, they are very different.
Yes.
Because everything is a meet.
Yeah.
Basically, everything is a meeting.
Yeah.
So everything has an agenda.
All right.
You'll go there, you start
right.
a specific time, it ends at specific time.
Right.
You have a specific purpose. There's usually a moderator. Hey, let's not lose our focus.
Right.
And that's really, it's funny because maybe it's when we lose our focus that we get the ideas.
No, it literally happens, right?
What if we could do this thing?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I really can say a lot, and now you need to steer me a little bit so I don't lose my focus and don't come up with another crazy idea.
No, please. Like what will be that next thing actually? So while we're here. No, it's very cool. And I appreciate it. And it's like, I appreciate the fact that when, it was the broadband forum meeting right when COVID hit, we were in Budapest. And, I ended up getting the Distinguished Fellow Award. And then one of the things I was saying in the speech I was giving was, now we've become like standards world becomes like family, right? Like a whole other family.
It is,
right? And we all know each other and we all hang out, we all do stuff. And we all work for different companies. We all live in very different places. But when we get to see each other, it's like nothing changed. Right.
And what makes it fun, I think, is because we have such a rich diversity of companies, that means richness in perspective and priorities. And so you need to sometimes you get into, I don't know if difficult conversations is the right word, but because I'm mentioning this because at the end of the day, we have to make things that make sense for our businesses.
Yeah.
Because, businesses have a purpose.
Well, otherwise they couldn't afford to send us here.
Yeah. And they have to work. So we have to be able to do things while working. So how can you, sometimes there are ideas that are always win-win relationships. Sometimes, unfortunately, they conflict with one another.
Yeah.
And, I think being able to sit with people from companies that sometimes compete with you
Oh yeah.
and still being able to see through that
Yeah.
and come up with something which is a win-win. I think that's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's not something that happens in most other subjects in the world,
Because it's very easy to turn against each other. It is very easy to be written on that and being able to say, hey, guys, maybe there's something that we are not really looking into it. Okay, there are things that we have to admit. We are going to compete because, we have our work to do, but maybe there come things that we can do that improve both our lives along the way. Or maybe we just create new tools to fight against each other.
Against both at the same time.
It can be a side.
Well, something I've always noticed is that, and many different technologies go through this. It's not just it seems to be. I mean, maybe it's just bias because that's what we do. But it seems to be the case that there is a general pattern that there will be proprietary solutions that are invented and they stick around for a while, but eventually standardization kind of wins out and everything kind of like normalizes back out again. Right.
It is. And I can say a lot about it. I don't know if I ever had this conversation with you, but this conversation about USB, the applications, the high level API, it started on a very distant. So I think the concept, the problem which we were trying to solve was well identified. So basically we had a big diversity of devices. Sometimes, there are some OpenWRT based devices. Sometimes there are some RDK devices. Sometimes there are proprietary software, and service providers, they want to innovate. They want to improve the customer experience.
Right.
And, doing internet connectivity is not good enough anymore.
It's not.
Right. But how can you actually create new services, new experiences, if you spend all the effort just doing the same thing all over again? It's just a different divine set.
Especially when, I mean, I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but in the US, most people don't like their network operators, right? Because we have very big companies that generally have monopolies in certain areas. And it's always kind of a running gag that, it's your network your internet provider is like, the thing that you don't like, right? It's the thing you have to do. It's like, oh, darn those guys. Right. And that's finally changing, right? Because they're finally getting the message. And now they have the opportunity to be a little bit more liked because, they're actually being seen to be doing useful things for the subscriber.
I try to think in a positive way. I think we all have good intentions, what we are trying to do, but sometimes it's, especially, for example, with a service provider. So I consider myself the kind of person that comes with a lot of ideas, and I usually surround myself with older people. So they usually have a different perspective than somebody younger usually doesn't have. So I was that engineer that just wants to change things. It wants to do it in the right way. But then you face reality and you see, hey, this is not about creating nice things. This is about creating something that works and is compatible with what's already existing.
Yeah.
Because, it's not affordable to just redo everything just for the sake of redoing.
Right.
And that's, I think, what puts service providers in a very difficult way, because we have so many different customers with so many different needs. And how can you build products that you can adapt to different needs, but you can also make them somehow affordable for a mass scale? Because let's be honest. If you look at the mobile world, the customer buys his own phone. So he can decide, do I want an expensive phone? Do I want a more basic phone? But the service provider is also usually responsible for the CPE. So you have to be able, and the challenge is, how can you build a product that will make the customers that want to spend a little bit more, or the customers that need a more affordable solution? How can you make all that masses happy?
Yeah, you're so right about
easy.
How everybody has in the past, right? When you're just delivering internet service, you have to treat everybody as if they have the same needs. Right. Like they don't. Like, and that's a really difficult position to be in when you're trying to service, like, especially when you don't know, right? You don't know what it is, how it is that they use their service, or why it is that they decide to stick around, or,
Yes. And this is why the work that we are doing with the application is very interesting, because you can think of it just as a technology, but it's an enabler because it provides this capability to differentiate and to even allow the different customers to subscribe to different services, right? Okay, maybe there's a family which has some kids. Okay, maybe it makes sense for them to have parental controls or something like that, right?
Right.
But if just a younger couple living alone or somebody, why would you need parental control?
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then all of that stuff is either running or not running and taking up, if you try to just give everybody everything, that's not going to work.
Because and this is also a very interesting aspect, especially I think in the time that we are right now, that people are realizing that we have limited resources, right? So people are now being faced to take decisions. Where do I spend my money? Where do I spend my resources? I think this makes this problem even more interesting,
right?
Because I can give another example. And this one is also interesting because even though I have always been a technical person, I didn't know these things before I started working in operator, which is the root platform usually has a lot of services that operate locally that most customers do not know.
Right.
File sharing, printer sharing. Okay. We don't talk too much. You can argue how useful these are, but it doesn't, they are there. They can help some people serve some things.
Right.
And they could be used more. It's just people don't know about them. So even technical people are not aware about these things. How can you expect the regular people to know it?
Right. Especially when the intention is that they should never have to interact with that thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But what I was trying to say, I was just trying to build the right context to say that if all these people have these services and they are not using it, you can take them out of the device.
Yeah.
So you can actually save energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, okay, but just a software module running there. Okay. But then you multiply that by 1 million or even more devices, then maybe that starts to make the difference. And not all of that, you can also maybe say, hey, I also don't need that. Maybe my device doesn't need so much memory or so much CPU power or whatsoever.
You save money.
So, and all these little things, they start to add up. And at the end, if you have the capability or the flexibility to take things in and out, I think the customer will want it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great. And it got me thinking about what it is we're going to call this thing, right? Because we're so used to calling it the Wi-Fi router, right? And most consumers understand it as well. So maybe that's what's going to stick around. But I was trying to brainstorm yesterday. I was like, what do we call this new thing? Is it like just like the home hub? Is it like the center for all stuff going on in your house? Like
it's not
like
easy.
in a way that the consumer can understand it and be like the retail, not that this would necessarily be retail, but the way that the retail world can understand it, right? I'm going to buy this particular appliance, right? It's now an appliance.
It is.
Right?
It is. And the name is not very easy. I even did a presentation some years ago. I decided to label my presentation as smart routers just because I felt that sometimes in the fixed space we are catching up a little bit with the mobile, in the sense that look at what happened with smartphones, right?
Right.
I mean, back then it was just a phone. If you ask a kid today, he didn't say phone, we said smartphone. They don't even realize that thing was just a phone. The only thing it was doing was making calls, sending SMSs. You could only have 15 or 10 SMSs in your device. You couldn't see crazy.
It's funny you say that because I always wonder, like, so my youngest daughter is 4, or she's going to be 4 next week. Right. And she only knows what a phone is, like with a cord. She only knows that from watching old kids cartoons, like Blue's Clues. Right. But she's still like, it's kind of part of the collective consciousness now, right? So she knows that that's a phone, but she calls this a phone, right? And I always wonder if there's some sort of dissonance in there. Like, how is that a phone? This a phone?
Right. That's interesting,
right?
But it is, and but to what I was trying to say is, it was just a phone, and how they did become a smartphone. You just started to find new use cases. You start to combine other devices, like then it became a camera, then it became a GPS, then it became a music player. Just because why? Because the customer couldn't afford to carry all this stuff around, but he always needed the phone.
Right.
He always needed the phone because that was needed for emergency to talk. So I think that put the phone in a very good position, that he started to take away the other devices. And I also noticed that happening, for example, with the gateways. So the gateway is started with two devices or even one, but the gateway is already a modem, right? Because you don't get an Ethernet cable at home directly from the service providers. That would never work. Right? Technology is not prepared for that. So you have to need something to convert DSL, DOCSIS, fiber into an Ethernet connection that's modem.
Yep.
Then you have the router to, manage all the services, all the phones. Then you need the Wi-Fi. That's also another device.
Yep.
So here we already have 3 devices together. And now you start to see more use cases coming in. Now it's the security. Now it's the smart home. So I think the gateway is in a good position to start absorbing all these capabilities.
Right.
Because guess what? All of them, they need internet access.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's the same position that they were with a phone.
Right. It is all things in that are, that's why I was trying to think of the name. It's like, they're all things that are around connectivity, even in some cases more than that. And it's like, that's why it's such a cool opportunity for operators, because it is the thing that is aware of everything that's going on at the network. So anything that can be of value that involves being aware of everything that's going on the network is something that box can do,
And I mean, there is really so much that can be done there that we're not doing it. So for example, I also think that now that because more people are bringing more connected devices, especially with smartphones, that's really it's creating more leverage for service providers, because now, hey, before maybe you just had 2 or 3 devices connected to your gateway. That was the computers, and it was the phones, and it was the televisions. Now it's the fridges, the vacuum cleaners, and all of these things.
What was it that Tim said? Tim has 32 devices in his house right now.
Yeah, and maybe they don't even know how many devices they have, and they only realize it's a bus because it shows up in the list of connected.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean that's actually creating leverage, because the more devices connected, the more things you can do.
Right.
The more things, I don't know. I think internet connectivity becomes more important, so you can start offering other things like, okay, a fallback if there's an outage in the network, because maybe it wasn't important if you just have a laptop, and now it's your security camera.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, do you really want to, really want to go through that experience of traveling, not, you get a notification, you cannot access it anymore. So, so that's it. Then, for example, I was having a conversation with a friend, like then, and he was saying, hey, I have all these devices connected at home. How do I really know that my neighbor or somebody else is not breaking in and accessing these devices? So I think that opens up new use cases for the service provider to say, hey, let me bring that comfort to you. Let me give you more visibility. Let me bring you monitoring capability, so you can really see who is accessing, and so on, empowering the customer to really be in control. And you cannot imagine how these things are important. Just the other day, I also went through an experience where, for example, I set up a Raspberry in my parents' home. I created a little VPN there, and then suddenly I'm accessing my device. And I SSH into it, and I see, hey, there's an SSH attempt from a local device. My parents don't know how to do this, right? And I just thought, this must be my brother, because he also knows. And I phoned him and said, no, I wasn't even being there. It was like, and this is how I actually found out that there was a virus in a computer.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So it's, I mean, the more devices people have, the higher the chances of them being hacked or breaking in. And this is a thing. This is a thing. It's just people don't know it is.
Right.
I just give you a perfect example where I just managed to find it out
Mhm.
because a malicious user, I happen
Did
to
you
have a
find out?
device.
Did you find out what device it was?
Yeah, I managed to find the
Yeah.
device it was, and I managed to sort it out. I even managed to locate the original IP address. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah. I found out a lot about.
Was it just like a PC? Was it just like a laptop or something, or was it a IoT
Yeah.
device?
I was connected to the Raspberry, so I have full control of the device. I can access logs. I can see a lot of things, and then I saw it was one laptop trying to get into the Raspberry. And
Wow.
It was my parents' laptop, and the moment I saw the IP address and the MAC address, I was like, okay, and I started asking my parents questions. Hey, were you on this laptop at this time? And it's not, and they kept saying yes. And when they keep saying yes, and something is going on.
Yeah.
And we got back to it, and then we fixed it.
Right. Cool, man. But you're right. It's like that's the kind of thing that an operator can offer.
We do.
Right.
We can. I think we are in a very good position to help ourselves and help customers.
Well, right. And it's helpful for the operator because I remember we talked about this at NetworkX last year. It's like, it's almost flipping things on its head because before network connectivity is when it's more like a utility, right? When it's like water or electricity, you just want it to work.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to know about it.
You don't want to interact.
You don't want to interact with it. You just want it to work. Now the operators have this opportunity to not be invisible, right?
It's exactly as you mentioned it, because who wants to interact much with the tap water besides getting water, right? But I mean, we realize this, and so we pride ourselves on. You can see it on two ends. On one hand, if it becomes commodity, it means that it works so well that the customer doesn't realize it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a double-edged sword,
right?
Because then the customer also forgets about it,
right?
And that's the part.
And they just see a bill,
and they just say a bill, and then they forget all the good things, all the work that we are putting in order to make that to provide that experience,
right?
So this is where we are now trying to bring new experiences to the customer, and we have so many opportunities. I still remember starting my journey, my career working in service providers, and a lot of people around me tell me, "Oh, that's boring. That's just internet. What else?
Not.
What else can
That's
you
where
do?"
some of those stories came from.
Yeah, but you start to somehow being a little bit influenced by that. There were little times I was like, okay, do I really want to be doing this for my life? But then I started to see the opportunity. I started to see, hey, there's so much untapped potential in this world. There's so much that we can do.
Yeah.
This is actually a fun place.
It is.
And then what we just talked about with USP and the application is just a startup.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And we get to use it.
Yeah, we get to use it.
Which is really cool.
So let's make sure it works.
Oh man. So yeah, it's we have a lot to do. So we're going to go do that. I guess the one thing that I would want to say is like, I keep hitting this home about the fact that, in the US, there are operators. It's like for the people who are listening that are on the consumer side of things, it's like, love your operator. I don't know what they're trying to do to please you.
We are doing a lot.
It's a lot of work.
I didn't know as well.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's get out there. It's looks like there's a lot more people here than there were yesterday. Which I came in and it wasn't as well attended as it seems. Yeah, so it's exciting. All right. Usual stuff. If people have got this far and you want to comment about some of the things that we've talked about, especially from your experiences as an internet consumer, I'm very curious what people think about what we're talking about and whether or not, how it appeals to you. Like, am I going to be accidentally gathering market data on how the end user actually like understands what we're talking about and like if it's valuable to them?
I mean, I actually think that's a good thing, and I think you should perceive it as we are actually giving you the opportunity, and you have to give us feedback so that we can try to improve our product. So,
Yeah.
I mean, definitely leave some feedback. I mean, you don't have to agree with us. I mean, just be constructive. Lay out the challenges and lay out the ideas, the suggestions. Tell us how we can help you. And then for sure we'll have conversations, and sometimes or even many times we'll say, hey, let's give that a try.
Right. We'll have some new app ideas.
Yeah. And we are trying. I mean, look at how we end up here. We just had a conversation. We said, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
And we did.
And now we're sitting right
here. So beware of that, because if you leave an idea, it might happen.
All right. Usual stuff. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. That will help everybody, especially me. But that will help everybody see what we're talking about more often. Please leave comments. Please subscribe on your podcast platform if you happen to be listening to this, because that will get you everything automatically, which is nice. And above all, own the nerdy things you love and have fun doing them.
Thank you.